Om. Om. Welcome to Meaningful Morning. A special welcome to all of our Boston high school students. The RAD I gave them yesterday, their application was to join Meaningful Mornings. And I told them that I can see who's joining and who's not. So many of them have joined. I like to listen to instrumental music when I travel or when I'm folding my clothes or whatever it may be. And so often when I'm listening to Tushar Lal or Evening Raga and so on, then a YouTube ad will come up. Yes, you can all hear that YouTube voice. And it says, get YouTube Premium because then there won't be any breaks in your instrumental music. And they're so smart. I'm always thinking, how do you know? But I heard a recent video that's shared. Unless you're watching kids' videos, then you need a break. Meaningful Mornings is much more than a break, but it's also a break. A break from the functional. We have such extensive to-do lists. We're doing, some of you are commuting, some of you are cutting vegetables, some of you are sleeping. So with big to-do lists and we're doing, this is our break to shift to the fundamental, to make what's important, important. Bhagavad Gita's chapter 15, verses 1 and 2 describe stuckness. This stuckness is in the form of a tree. If you've all seen the original Jurassic Park, remember when that Jeep gets stuck in the tree? They copied this from Bhagavad Gita's chapter 15. And if you haven't seen the original Jurassic Park, where do you live? Verses 3 through 5 are sharing how we can cut this tree and stuckness. It is by slowing down. This causes one to step back, which causes one to see more. When one sees more, what do they see? In verse 6, Shri Krishna's message is, you are not stuck because there are no roots to this tree. There can't just be a tree. A tree has to have roots. So if there's no roots, then there's no tree. For us, there is no individuality. There's no creation. Similarly, there's no divinity. There's no creator. There is only infinity. That is consciousness. There's no tvam, there's no tat. There is only asi. Asi means are, is. The most beautiful definition of asi is be. Just be. When one forgets this, when one forgets there is no roots, there is no tree, then one feels limited. One feels chapter 14. Comparatively, if one remembers divinity while you're doing what you're doing, but you're remembering divinity, the reason for your birth, how you were born, then one doesn't feel limited. One feels like they are the pati, the Maya pati. If you forget, limited. If you don't forget, you feel limitless. And Sri Krishna, he verifies this. In verse 6, he uses a phrase, paramam mama. In verse 7, mama sanatana. Paramam means absolute. Sanatana means absolute. Mama means my. My absolute. My absolute. Now, what's unique about this? Please think more carefully about this. When Vivek shares my pen, my hair, there is a difference between me and my. Acknowledged in reference to the absolute, me and my are the same. So when Shri Krishna shares mama, mama does mean my. When you think of this logically, what does the absolute own or have? There is only the absolute. And so the practice for us, as you go about with all of your to-do lists, interdepend. Be careful not to depend. Treat what you're engaged in as relative. Then you'll have the right relationship with articles, being, circumstances, remembering divinity or the absolute. And this is obvious. In verse 8, Sri Krishna uses terms like utkramati and ashayat. Utkramati means to go. Ashayat means to go. Everything you've ever touched in your life has gone. If you've lived in the house you're living in your whole life, it's still gone though. The house you lived in 2020 is very different than the house you're living in 2023. It's decaying. So treating it as relative is obvious. I had mentioned yesterday about another practice in reference to using the sense organs is whatever your sense organs are engaged in, whatever they're touching, to try to make this sattvic, that this will make you quieter. And the specific phrase I had used was, when you know you're touching that which is sattvic, you feel the sense of enough. Does anyone know the Sanskrit word for enough? You can type this out in the chat. The Sanskrit word is alam. A-L-A-M. This actually comes from another word for fire, which means anala. Anala means never enough. If you think of the forest fires in Canada, America, now Hawaii. For a forest fire, there's never enough forest, correct? So if you find when you're engaging your sense organs that there's never enough, then you're not engaged in that which is sattvic. But if you do have this sense of enough, you're engaged in that which is sattvic. So pay attention. Pay attention to your interactions with articles, beings, and circumstances. Yesterday when I was speaking, I had mentioned that Pujaswami Chinmayananda's Mahasamadhi Aradhana, the day he chose for his body to die, was Tuesday, August 3rd, but actually it was Thursday, August 3rd. And I'm only pointing out how important it is to pay attention. That I was not paying attention, so I shared the wrong date. And to you, that may not be a big deal, but to me it is, because it's a sign that I'm not paying attention. Then next is I justify why I should do this and that. Shri Krishna continues sharing about the relativity of all around us. And if you remember this, you will remember if there's a relative, there's an absolute. And eventually you'll remember if there's an absolute, there's no relative. Verse 10. Utkramantam stitam vapi bunjanam vagunanvitam vimudha nanupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. Joy. Utkramantam means to go. You've come across this word already in reference to the body dying. Stitam means to stay, the way most of you are seated right now. Va api, and also bunjanam, which means to eat or to enjoy. What Shri Krishna is identifying with these three descriptive words are some of the verbs we engage in. Va means other, api means also. His point is, we engage in a lot of verbs. Listening, reflecting, contemplating. But who's engaged in these verbs? Gunanvitam, the one who feels that they're limited. The one who feels that they're the gunas. If you think of this practically, only the finite can move. Can the infinite move? If you're saying yes, where would it be? And if you identify a place, then it's not infinite. When we start to study the Upanishad together, there are many words that deny any sort of limitation through space, time, and matter. As an example, a time limitation is denied when the word nitya is used. What does nitya mean? Eternal or constantly. You can't measure that time. Our rishis, Sri Krishna, are brilliant in using the right words for us to reflect on. And if you don't reflect on them, they're all the wrong words. Vimudha. What does mudha mean? Fool. But you never use that word in your day-to-day affairs. That should be your rad today. Use the word fool. Vimudha means very moody. The one who is always just shifting between laziness, aggressiveness, quietness. Na anupashyanti. They just don't see. When you're trying to describe something to someone, to a family member, and they're not understanding, don't you say, why can't you see this? Don't you understand this? For the one who feels like they are the gunas, they feel like they're just the gross body. What is the gross body? The sense organs. And I'd specified yesterday that the subtlest organ we have is the sense of hearing, then touching, then seeing, then tasting, and then smelling. What determines the subtlety? It's how many of the organs can actually engage that element. So as an example, if you reflect on Earth, Earth is the grossest element. Can you hear Earth? Yes, when it moves. Can you touch earth? Of course. Can you see earth? Yes. Can you taste earth? Yes. Can you smell earth? Yes. Now let's shift to space. Can you smell space? Can you taste it? Can you see it? Can you feel it? It's the subtlest. So, my point here is that the one who feels that they're just the gross body, and so they just engage the sense organs, they're never going to see that which is within. Comparatively, jnana chakshushaha, the one whose eyes are filled with jnana. That means they're not using sight, but insight. What happens to them? Pashyanti. They don't see, but they can feel. They have a feeling. If there's a gross body, then there has to be a subtle body. That's their thoughts. If there's a subtle body, there has to be a causal body. That's their prints. And if there's a causal body, think about the term body. Body is mine. There has to be a owner or a me. That is the Atma or center. So in this verse, Sri Krishna is systematically showing us how the verbs depend on the bodies depend on the center. If you feel you are the center, you will become free of any limits of this body. You'll become free of the need for any verbs. Imagine I took your to-do list today and I did it for you. That can be our life. From inspiration to application. Your application was to register for our annual Seva training, Sunday, October 1st, focused on working with those in the second generation. Today, when I was working with our Seeker to Facilitator students, I shared that if my grandfather judged my mother when she was my age, she would resist that judgment less than if my mother judges me. I would resist it more. Do you agree? Generation by generation, there's more resistance to matters like judgment. And that's why cultural sensitivity, generational sensitivity is important when working with people. On Friday, September 1st, our police officers in Niagara are coming to the ashram to learn about cultural sensitivity. That's how they'll work better with the Hindus in the community, to work with any community member. Your application for this morning we have now completed half of this spirit of Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 15 is the spirit. We've completed half of it. Tomorrow we will complete day 40 of this semester. Tomorrow we will complete day 800 of our study of Bhagavad Gita. How awesome is it that there's 700 verses, but we've already invested 800 days. And so your application is realize this. Realize what Bhagavad Gita has done to you. Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi. Be joy.